I'm Dr. Andrew Wichterman, and I've started making commentary on different videos, vlogs, podcasts, things that have to do with mental health, especially mental health from Christian perspective. Now, this one today does not have anything to do with Christian mental health, but it does have to do with some societal things, where Joe Rogan interviews a journalist talking about anxiety and treatment for anxiety, especially with Generation Z. There's some things I think that are a little bit off, and she's done some other things, and so I want to make comment on that. We'll go through the vast majority of this video. There's a little bit of foul language. It's Joe Rogan, so if you're sensitive to that, go ahead and turn it off. I generally am myself, but I'm making comments, so it's not going to be a big deal. Here.
One of the hardest, most worrisome parts of this generation is that they have the lowest sense of efficacy. They report an external locus of control, meaning they don't think they can improve their lives. See,
This is all true, by the way. You see it. There's a couple of books written recently just on this topic about how anxiety goes up when these kind of things happen.
millennials thought they could do anything, right? They're the Mark Zuckerberg generation. And that's why we had so many tech founders in that generation.
By the way, I'm on the oldest side of the millennials and the youngest side of the Generation X, so I'm not sure what that means about me.
We're not seeing that with these young people. They don't want to be in charge. They're afraid and they don't feel up to it. I call every year on her birthday, and she's a research scientist, cell biologist. And every year she invites kids to her lab for an internship, top kids, pre-med graduates from college before they go into med school. And she said to me in the last decade, when I called her this year for her birthday, she said to me, I can't believe you're writing about this generation. They are so different. And I said, tell me why. She said, I'm seeing the smartest, most prepared kids, and they're afraid to run their own experiments. They tell me they're getting ready. They're working on their skills. They're not yet up to it. And they constantly report to me about their mental health.
I see this kind of thing too, even in the therapy room, where they're afraid of the next step. Yeah.
How they're feeling today. They can't just take a chance and go with it.
Mm. It's weird because as a parent, you want to hear kids out. And when they're having some sort of anxiety and issue, you want to talk with them and you want to talk through it.
Sure.
You don't want to tell them, hey, you're going to have to suck it up. I never say that. And I probably should.
I say it in certain situations to say you're gonna have to find a way to tolerate this, which is basically the same thing, because sometimes you just have to be able to swallow it. So I do that with my own kids, and I'd recommend you do something like that with yours, with a high level of understanding and connection.
I don't know if I should. But I mean, if I had boys, I probably would. I think I would probably treat them
I do
differently.
have boys.
But I think that there's a fine line. Like,
Yeah.
where is the point of diminishing returns? Where is it valuable to address feelings and anxiety and thoughts? And is it irresponsible to do so without giving them tools to mitigate those things? And along with those tools, to explain to them that there's things that they're going to have to do in this life that are very difficult, but that there's a great reward in doing these very difficult things.
So the problem,
Right. We went from everything's hard, suck it up all the time. If you're not bleeding, you're fine, to worse than that, to don't tolerate any distress. I'll fix it. I'll make it better. Helicopter parenting and worse.
as I see it, is not that you're not saying suck it up. It's that no one ever says suck it up, no matter how minor the scratch to these kids. Okay. And sometimes being told you'll live. Remember when
Yeah.
dad used to say you'll live or shake it off? We never hear shake it off anymore. No one says it. So they don't know they can
Unless it's a Taylor Swift song.
overcome even minor injuries. And the truth is they can. But they recently did these studies on these coping techniques, taught coping techniques to teenagers, over 1,000 teenagers in Australia. It was called the Wise Teens Program. That was the point. It was just to help them with emotional regulation. And it turned out it made kids sadder and more anxious. They measured this. And the reason was regularly ruminating on your bad feelings can make you feel worse.
Hmm.
This is true. It's scientific. There's a bunch of research behind it, by the way. If we focus in on that all the time, or if somebody comes into therapy and they just want to complain all the time, one of the reasons we try to get them off of that is because they're ruminating on the problems as opposed to going for a solution.
Did you talk to therapists when you did this?
Yeah, a lot of therapists.
Yeah. How many?
And by the way, this is not a solution to dismiss their feelings and emotions. This is a solution to help them work through them. One of the things that I often do in therapy is I'll say, it's my job to make you feel the pain and to be able to tolerate it. Are you ready? And I get into it with them about it because so many times they just avoid it. When we as therapists, which as a field, we haven't done very well at that, but part of our job is supposed to be to help them tolerate pain and to work through it. So many times in the field, we talk about helping people avoid it or just affirming, and a lot of times it's not healing for people.
Agree with you.
So there was a huge split. The academic research psychologists overwhelmingly agreed. They were aware of the literature and they said, yeah, these are bad practices. Here are things we shouldn't be doing with kids. What was interesting is a lot of the clinical therapists were either minimized the risks of therapy or denied that there weren't.
We like to act like there aren't any at all. It is true. And we can do some serious damage if we don't know what we're doing.
Mm. But isn't that like Jiffy Lube? Like when you tell them you don't need to change your oil that much. Well, it's their business to change oil.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Or I've had people hang on to clients that I've known in the therapy world because they can't keep a caseload full and are trying to make a living. So they try to keep people coming. And almost by accident, you could say, or self-fulfilling prophecy, they make the client take longer to heal. It's one of the reasons why I love EMDR.
Like I talked to this one amazing child psychologist who said to me, I start by having my patients sign a waiver in which they acknowledge that there can be risks.
Yeah.
And the reason I do that is because I don't want them to experience harm. So if they see that their worries are getting worse, they have to tell me.
Huh. But do they? Would they? I mean, it seems like the therapist is the one who's in control, right?
Right.
The therapist is the
But we're not supposed to be in that kind of control. We guide, we nudge, we lead. But the client should have more control. Two lay people talking about what therapy they think therapy should be. They're not unintelligent by any means, but what it's supposed to be and what it is are often two different things. Therapists take a lead far too often in ways that aren't helpful.
they're the one who has the authority.
Right. Well, this one was Camilo Ortiz was one of the I was referring to there. And first of all, he always starts it there by setting the number of sessions. It's not he doesn't treat a kid like an annuity. You're gonna be my income stream for years.
Right.
He attacks and also they come to him with an actual problem, like chronic bedwetting, like various kinds of phobia.
Hmm.
There are people who treat anorexia. They're tackling a problem.
Right.
And some of those therapies are extremely necessary and very successful.
When this person that you were just describing, if they get someone that comes to them that doesn't have a real problem, do they turn them away?
Well, you can ask, but very often the therapists don't turn them away. That's the problem.
Right.
Too many therapists. I think back to the first book, and I would ask, like, did anyone have a therapist who said, you know what? I don't think the trans identity fits you.
It's so unkosher. You go to a conference, you go to anything. It's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. Listen to the research she talks about here.
That doesn't seem to make sense to me. On almost no cases did the therapist stop a girl from going down that road. No, you don't have gender dysphoria. Listen, it's mostly little boys. Okay, it's overwhelmingly little boys. Starts with little boys, and you see it in men. It's overwhelmingly male phenomenon, and it always starts ages 2 to 4. So you discovering this at age 12, let me tell you something with your friends, it's so unlikely. We don't even need to go there. They never.
Well, it's like a contagion. It's not just that stuff. There's plenty of things, and it's things like self-harm and well, those TikTok trends that can be really dangerous. Like teenagers do this kind of stuff in groups. It's what happens. It's part of their development.
Well, I think they get scared of the blowback as well.
Yeah, sure.
What they would hear from their parents. You're telling my child they don't have a problem when they have a problem.
Well, also the incentive is for therapists to treat the least sick for the longest period of time. That's the incentive.
It's true. I don't like working with harder clients these days because I did a ton of that for a long time. It is emotionally exhausting. You will burn out. See, that's the thing that probably not going to understand in this video is as a therapist, you can't keep going with all your clients are super difficult.
Because you don't want the schizophrenic patient who really needs you.
Right.
Well, you don't want 20 of them. You might like be okay with 3 or 4, but you don't want 20 of them at the same time because you won't make it in the field.
They're really hard to treat.
That is unless you're an expert. Not almost impossible. There's plenty of healthy treatments and people with schizophrenia living healthy lives.
You don't want the bipolar patient.
Right.
Some people will refuse to see those patients. But a teenager with a little social anxiety, parent pays on time, they're not getting violent in your session.
Wow.
Okay, that's another thing that drives me nuts about this video. The research that I've seen in the past and the numbers that I'm aware of, now I could be wrong on this, but historically, people with schizophrenia are not the violent ones. It's more like antisocial personality disorder. People with schizophrenia are only violent ever if they're in a delusion. They're often gentle, kind people when they're connected. And so they get this bad rap on movies and things and podcasts when they're really not as they're not the violent ones in most cases. Though it happens, and it always makes news when it does, but by the percentages, they're not as bad as some of the other some of the other people who have to deal with other diagnoses that could cause these things.
I never really considered that until your book. Thinking about your problems all the time and talking about your problems all the time literally make the problems grow.
That's right. I mean, it's the number one symptom of depression is what they call rumination,
It doesn't really make your problems grow, it makes your perception of the problems grow.
this pathological
Mhm.
obsessing over your pain.
Yeah.
That's why stuff like exercise, that's one of the reasons, aside from chemical reasons, one of the reasons that doing anything, that running errands is good for your mental health, getting out of your house and accomplishing anything
Yeah.
is good for you. But sitting around talking and thinking about your problems, that's a bad habit. And the best cognitive behavioral therapists and others, the dialectical behavioral therapists, the ones who do really well with depression, the first thing they do is try to break that bad pattern. But a lot of therapists just indulge it.
It's a luxury that's provided to you by a life that's fairly safe. People that live in war-torn countries and have very difficult lives, they don't have that luxury of just sitting around all day and doing nothing and oh, I go outside and run errands. That's going to make me feel better. You're dealing with real stress.
That's right.
And I think that there's an expression that someone told me once, and I say it all the time. The worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. If it's you got a dent in your car or it's your parents get killed in a car accident,
Mm-hmm.
either one of those things is the worst thing, depending on the level of whatever stress or anxiety or horrible things that you've experienced in your life. That sort of measure, that's your watermark for what you can and can't tolerate.
That's right. And what we should be telling kids is that the amazing story of human history is of resilience. It used to be the case that people lost a sibling. That was common. People lost a parent. That still happens, right? These things still happen. And the amazing story of human history is that doesn't mean it's not painful, but of resilience. They get on. They aren't permanently suffering with mental illness or mental problem. They form families. They are responsible in their jobs. They show up for work. They can be depended on by their friends. That's the story of human survival and resilience. And unfortunately, we're telling kids, no, you've had trauma.
So all that is true, but where we're placing our hope is also terribly important. This is not hope and change Barack Obama, which never was clearly defined. Of course, that's true of any political thing. I mean, what does make America great again mean? What does no malarkey mean, or whatever Joe Biden had?
Yeah. Yeah. You've had trauma and you need to work through that trauma.
Right.
It's not just, this is just a part of life. And what you need to do is just go out there and live your life and you'll get over it.
And the thing is, the truth is that most kids and most people did. In other words, that didn't mean that dad didn't lose his job and they were forced out of they had to lose their house, or these things happen. They've happened in every family. And I think one of the many reasons that kids don't know this today is we've cut them off from extended family. The story of their grandparents.
It's true. It's true. I tell my kids stories about their grandparents. My one or great grandparents, I should say. My one grandpa was a street kid in Toledo, Ohio. He was straight out of a Newsies movie. He had the outfit and everything. His mom would drop him off at weeks at a time while she went to stay with her next boyfriend. She was married 5 times. One of the guys tried to kill him with an ice pick. My other grandpa was farmed off to his aunt and uncle's house, who liked his twin brother better than him when his mother died. And when they wouldn't let him go to school in junior high, he hopped a fence and worked for the railroad. Like this, I tell my kids these stories all the time. I'm like, you have it so good. You need to understand these people sacrificed so you could be here.
is a story of resilience in almost every case, right? You hear about your family history, and you're going to hear a story of pain and survival.
Yeah.
And resilience and overcoming. But today you've got teenagers who say, oh, I can't drive past my middle school where I was bullied because of my PTSD. They don't have PTSD, but they think that.
Here's the thing about it. In some cases, those kids do have PTSD, frankly, and they just need to work through it. This is dismissing of human emotions. You can say, hey, this is really hard. You've been struggling with this, and you need to get through this because you're not going to be able to live a healthy life if you don't. And our hope is in what? I still haven't heard that. Not going to hear it.
What do they have though? If you are bullied, that does have a significant psychological effect on kids, and it
Yes,
can
it
lead
does.
to lifelong depression.
Yes, it does.
That it can.
It
Like,
it does because other things build on it if it's not addressed because they haven't been taught the skills to work through those things. So it's almost like she's contradicting herself. They've been taught the skills to work through those things because maybe their parents don't know the skills. And so they're just ruminating on them over and over again when they need to be taught the skills. If psychology is not affirming of the actual issue as completely normal, then they can help you work through as a therapist. The problem is when we're like, no, that's normal. Just go live your life. It's the other people that are the problem.
treated like shit and told that they're nothing and useless, and that sort of like when I didn't really get bullied in high school, but I remember going back towards my high school when I was like 19, and I'd get anxiety. I'd get weirded out by it.
So let
So
me
the-
just say, yeah,
You start feeling
Yeah.
what you used to feel when you went there.
absolutely. But that's not a PTSD flashback.
What is that?
Well, that's not, but others can be.
That's a bad memory.
You get your underwear ripped up past your head, somebody shoves you out of a locker room naked. I mean, stuff like that happens. So it's too dismissive for me right now.
And we have them. And by the way, when I say you can't have bullying, can mean anything. So when I say I'm talking about teasing, I'm not talking about the horrific abuse
Should have clarified that sooner, but okay.
that some kids have gone through.
Okay.
But do you have anxiety? Yeah, anxiety exists for a reason. It's actually adaptive. And so there are benefits to anxiety and there are negative parts. Now, I'm not talking about anxiety disorder. We don't want anyone to suffer with an anxiety disorder that
Okay, she keeps qualifying these things. We get the big statements and then the qualification afterwards. That's a little bit.
with daily life. But a little anxiety, feeling bad, and a bad memory, that's not only part of life, but it can have positive effects. So, some of the positive effects of anxiety is it helps with performance. If I weren't nervous for this right now, I wouldn't have prepared so much to make sure I remembered what I was going to talk about. And we don't want someone with no anxiety crossing a street because he's not going to look for cars.
Yeah.
And we're going in with medication and we're deleting things like anxiety,
I don't know if that's the best example. I think I'm still looking for cars just simply because I don't want to die, even if I'm not anxious about it. I understand the point, though.
anxiety helps you make beautiful memories. You remember Christmas morning because of all the nerves about it ahead of time, or you remember your first kiss.
You're not anxious about Christmas morning. You are excited. So this is my thing. When you get people who are lay people talking about these things, a lot of times they get misdefined. They get defined incorrectly.
Partially because of the anxiety. That's why the memories are so clear. And when we go in and we give kids a pill for that, not only are they not developing an emotional musculature they're going to need as adults, but they're losing a really important part of the human experience, like feeling low because you were dumped,
See, now that's true. I go along with that.
and then seeing you can get over it.
That's a very important thing we just said about experience anxiety. It actually helps you be sharper.
It does.
It really does. You have to be nervous before you do things
That's
that
right.
are difficult. It's just that uncomfortable feeling people avoid
Right.
because they get scared of the anxiety. But if you talk to like one of the best examples is UFC fighters. UFC fighters before they fight, they're all nervous. They're all scared. Every one of them, terrified,
Right.
and they don't want to fight if they're not.
Right.
If you're too calm and too relaxed, you actually have bad performances.
And I'll tell you something else. Same is true with depression. Now, I'm not talking about major depressive disorder that's chronic and needs treatment, of course, right? But a little,
It's not depression then. Maybe that's my hang up. If it's not diagnosable, it's not actually depression because it doesn't meet the definition for it.
you have something bad happen to you, you go through a divorce, you go through something hard, That doesn't mean you should never use meds or therapy if you absolutely need it, but there can be good. And here's what can be good. And the purpose, I learned this from interviewing a lot of evolutionary psychologists. And one of the good
That might be your problem right there.
things about depression is it shuts us down so we
Hey,
don't get
hey,
into
hey,
crash,
hey.
and we think about what change we might want to make in our life. Because sometimes we need to make a change. And if we just medicate away the bad feelings, the worst feelings might be dampened, but we also might be locked into that low state.
That is true, and it's also a not short-term fix, meaning medication only works as long as it works. You need to develop the skills and the ability to rebound so as to go off the medication and be healthy long term. That's my problem with medication, is it doesn't really help other than for the temporary.
Make the change we need to make.
Right.
Because we'll lose the motivation. That's the thing. We won't say, he treated me badly. I'm tired of this. I'm not getting back together with him.
Right.
We might just accept it and keep on.
Right.
Especially if you're medicated.
Yeah.
That will to make a big change often happens after we've been brought low.
I wonder where she got that from, that last thing. It's interesting. Folks, here's the thing, is they talk about no hope, they talk about an external locus of control as opposed to an internal locus of control, but there is, in that we've lost it, and that there's a loss of meaning and purpose. They didn't say that part quite out loud, but that's what they're getting at. How do you find hope apart from God? Sure, you could develop it in yourself. We were just having a conversation around that. You can develop an attitude of hope, and it can change the way you see things. I was in a meeting where we were talking about that. But people don't have purpose. They don't have foundation. They don't feel like they have any control over situations. They're constantly told, if you talk about teenagers and kids, by some high school teachers and junior high teachers and elementary school teachers, all of the opposite of these things: hope, self-control, internal locus of control, right? Purpose, drive. They're met with like this hopelessness, do whatever you want. The world is ending anyway, kind of thing. I don't know how people do it without Jesus. How do you even go to find hope without Jesus? I don't know. Don't understand how people do it. I've often said in therapy, how do people do this work without Jesus? Because I couldn't make it. There's too much pain, too much sorrow, without having an idea of there's something else out there that's better. And someday we'll get to live eternity with him in perfection. Need more of that.